Line unmuted.
I'm not asking questions.
Oh, yeah, it's wrong about the same way Jamie did. These are the office, he's just like, good as same age. We chased the Jeremiah. He's got a felony. Twice now.
Morning. Morning.
I want to take him to CDL, so, and the high school.
I'll be one.
Yeah, they didn't pick up for us, they didn't even move. They moved a little bit, then they moved a little bit over here, didn't move any.
I was supposed to pick up trash yesterday, just don't know that.
They made a strip, cut these strips down around back. Yeah.
I know they said they
Picked him trash up.
I think it's 10 days.
Yeah, I mean, 2 weeks. Just to make sure they said they don't, it says that they get.
Okay,
I ain't had none since the last.
right, so I didn't do anything.
Right.
Okay.
There's a thing on your voicemail.
Well, I was, I had to leave at lunchtime,
Yeah.
to take Hubs to the doctor, but, I'm just going to ask the board to approve, Okay,
have to. Now I'll still have a meeting.
About 9 o'clock, stand for prayer and the pledge, please. Father, we have to thank you right now for your goodness and your mercy. Just bless your name because your name is worthy to be blessed. Father, we come now to do the business of this county, this city, this state. Father, then we come in service right now to hear, listen, and to learn, and to make decisions. We will do this, Father, I hope, in the spirit of love and peace. We thank you now for what you've done thus far. We thank you for what you're going to do and what you've done. Bless your name, because your name will be blessed again. Help us as we go from one good degree to another. These blessings and all other blessings we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. As always, before we start our meeting, there's a few tidbits we'd like to share with you. And one of them is, there's been a compass line set up, and the number is 1-917-900-1022. The access code is 32347. And this is not a toll-free line, a number. You may be subject to long-distance charges according to your long-distance plan. When the chairperson opens the meeting for public comments, please follow the below instructions. If you wish to speak, please dial 5. The moderator will unmute your line when it's your turn to speak and notify you by announcing the last 4 digits of your phone number. Please announce your name and address, and you will be given 3 minutes to speak. Any person wishing to address the board regarding an agenda item will be given 3 minutes for comment. The commenter may only speak once or one time for each agenda item. Thank you. With that being said, do I have approval of the agenda?
Motion to approve. Second.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Can we pull item 13A out of consent
Yes, ma'am.
and move it to county administrator items?
Okay. 13A would like to be pulled from the consent agenda and move to the county administrator.
Motion to approve the revised agenda. Second.
Motion second, all in favor saying aye? Aye. Thank you. Okay. We go to item 4, the board to consider adoption of a resolution to Pat Tushman in recognition for his 37 years of service to Perry County. Mr. Pat Tushman here?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Your 37 years is an honor. We're glad you service. From what I can understand, you're a good employee. I want you to know we much appreciate that. Now, we do have a resolution to be read by title only, don't we?
Motion to read resolution by title only. Second.
All in favor saying aye? Aye. Okay, Mr. Bishop.
I'd just like to say one thing, that I've known Pat since he was a little boy playing ball, and you're retiring before me. It's a pleasure to read this. Whereas the Board of County Commissioners have been advised that Pat Tushman retired from the position of working team leader effective May 31st, 2022. And whereas Mr. Tushman began his employment on May the 9th, 1985 as a technician 2. He was promoted to foreman 1 on October 6, 1986, mechanic 2 on May 25th, 1995, heavy equipment operator 2nd on April 2nd, 1996, temporary team leader on October 8, 1998, and South working team leader on March 30th, 1999. And whereas Mr. Tushman has provided valuable services to the people of Taylor County and to the Board of County Commissioners, and Whereas the board wishes to publicly thank Mr. Touchton for his 37 years of dedicated service to our county. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of County Commissioners of Taylor County, Florida extends its heartfelt appreciation and gratitude to Pat Touchton for his service to the people of Taylor County and the Board of County Commissioners. Be it resolved that a copy of this resolution be furnished to Mr. Touchton and that a copy be placed in the minutes of the board, done and ordered in regular session at Perry, Taylor County, Florida, this 21st day of June, 2022.
So I hear a motion that we approve that. Motion second, all in favor, saying aye. Aye. Okay, approved. Thank you, Mr. Tucker.
Before you leave, can I get a photo with the board of you and Hank and Scott and a picture of you holding the resolution?
Want to do that now? Or?
Yeah, come on up.
Where do you do that?
Can y'all come down?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Okay. 1, 2, 3. And take one more. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Congratulations. Congratulations, man. Congratulations.
All right, we go to item number 14. Board to receive sealed bids for Taylor County closed landfill mowing and further.
We got to do the consent items. We didn't get those yet. Consent items.
Okay, we didn't do that?
No, motion we do that.
Motion to approve, consent item?
Second.
Motion second, all in favor, saying aye? Okay, now we go to 14. Board to receive sealed bids for Taylor County closed landfill mowing and fertilizer service. Set for this date at 9 a.m. or as soon thereafter as possible.
Well, only have one receipt.
Excuse me, the bid committee will be myself, Hank Evans, and Scott Knight. Is that a source?
No, it's just a who bid, there's only one bidder, so. The one bidder was T&N Lawn Masters LLC in Crawfordville, Florida.
Since there's one, you can just state the total.
So there's the total. Yeah, trimming, and then there's one.
So you could say this, and you say, put it, that total, that's Augustine Lake Fertilizer.
Yeah. So the total for the mowing and the trimming is $32,046, $32,046. Total for fertilizing is that's twice a year. The annual cost is $9,156.
And is that a substantial increase?
Yeah, I wouldn't stand here and tell you that we need to accept that. We need to that's well beyond what cost we have incurred in the past. Well, we follow the same publication requirements as everyone else, plus I put it in all of the mass mailing. I send notifications to them so they can let more people know. I even reached out to the one that was doing it before. He had staffing changes when all of the issues were hitting, but he had another year worth of extension. I tried to maximize that, but he just wouldn't do it anymore. But these costs are I want to say $12,000 total is about what I was expecting, based on every other year before, and this is well beyond that.
Well beyond that.
Yeah, it was $8,000, and it should have been 2 or less for each cycle. So it's 4 times what it should be.
It was 8,478.
Yes, sir.
The fertilizer and the fuel's going up, so I mean, I can understand a little bit of a bump in the price, but
Fertilizer last time was about 1,100 or 1,200 per each application, and you had 2 of those. You shouldn't go from 1,200 to 9 or to 4,000. That's more than a little bump. So I would just say that I would, my recommendation is to not accept this one, to re-advertise, and if it comes back the same, then apparently that's what the market is proposing. If it doesn't, then we've got to do something. You know, the first cycle was supposed to be in May. So the grass doesn't stop growing just because the bids aren't good. I got to figure out some way to literally address the growth as well as get this out as quick as I can.
how many acres is mowing for?
You taxed my memory, but I think it's about 28, possibly. Somewhere around that area, and then I think it's like 25 maybe, of fertilization, because I don't do the pond bottoms, I just do all the grass areas.
Okay. What do I get?
Motion to re-advertise.
Motion second, to re-advertise.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
All in favor, saying aye.
That includes rejecting the bid.
Motion to reject and re-advertise.
There you go.
So she had a question, you want to?
I was just going to ask if you can get quotes from a contractor for a one-time mowing while we're going through the process, or maybe utilize the contract we have in place to,
Well, what about this? So I know the roadside mowing is fixing to start, or started maybe this week or last week.
supposed to start this week.
They have I think it's boiled down to an acreage price in there. We could see if that was a possibility.
That was my thought process.
If he would extend that acreage price to this area, I can ask Hank if that's something that you do.
If they have time, I mean, I know it's going to take several weeks to get through the first cycle. So if you can wait until they get through the first cycle for them to mow, is it that time critical that you couldn't wait?
I don't have an option.
Okay. I mean, it could take, it may take 6 or 7 weeks.
The only other alternative would be to utilize in-house forces to do some mowing. That's my only 2 options. I'll get this back on the street as quick as I can,
And we could maybe get some quotes from local landscape companies for a one-time as well, a per acre price.
we'll try something.
So we got a motion and a second to reject all bids and re-advertise for bids.
Yeah, that was your motion. I got a second. All in favor, saying aye. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay, ultimate request. Board to consider approval of request of monthly donation of $15,000 to Taylor County Senior Center for the remainder of 2021-22 fiscal year as requested by Diane Landry, Board President. Ms. Landry.
thank you for allowing me to come and petition you for your help in funding the senior center services here in Taylor County. When I came earlier, it was to ask for a specific need that we had to replace a walk-in freezer. We were able to raise the funds on our own to cover that bill. It was the third major appliance that we had to replace in a 12-month period. During the COVID pandemic last year, many of the centers shut their doors. We were able to stay open because our employees devised a drive-by plan where the seniors could pick up their meals. They were not able to get together and socialize, but they at least were able to eat. Some neighboring centers serve an average of 15 people a day. They're serving hot meals, but one of the centers serves 4 days of frozen meals and 1 day of hot meals. We serve hot meal every day. During COVID, we were serving 50 people a day. Now we're serving 40 to 45 a day. By our contract with the state agency, we're only authorized to serve 24 clients. That means that a client has been assessed and is in definite need. Okay. That means we're picking up the tab for about 20 extra meals. If we try to cut down on that number, y'all are going to get phone calls asking why they were taken off the list. Besides that, the federal government says if they're over 60 years old and come through those doors and ask for a meal, we are to serve them, regardless. When we suggest that those who are not clients give us $10 to cover their meal, they tell us that they pay taxes and they shouldn't have to pay us. In December, the state agency told us not to worry about it, and they would give us the money to cover the overage. But here it is, the middle of the year, and we have not received the money. I tried to check with neighboring centers, neighboring counties, to see if they received money from their county governments to help cover their expenses. It's not easy to come by that information, and I'm not tech savvy enough to research it. I did find that Madison County gives $35,000 a year, and the city of Madison gives $25,000, total of $60,000 a year. And that they have a very nice, modern facility. That's part of our problem, trying to keep up an old facility that keeps falling apart. So I'm asking that you help us fund through the remainder of this fiscal year, and then that you put us on the budget for next year, and I'll be back when you're working on your budget. We are doing fundraisers when we can, but those efforts take our employees away from their regular jobs, and that hurts us in the long run. In addition to fundraising, we cut hours and some employee positions in an effort to balance the books. It helps, but it's not enough. And it hurts us in the long run because it takes away from the services that we're able to provide. With increased wages and increased food costs, we're struggling to continue to provide services, and we need your help. Thank you. Any questions?
Yeah.
Well, does the government put any money toward this?
Yes, services that we provide in the home health care and that sort of thing, we bill. And really, insurance companies pay most of that, but the state and the government pays some of it. Federal government pays some on the food cost, but it costs us about $14 a meal when you consider the labor that's involved and the cost of the food and all of that, and we get back about $10 a meal. So it's not enough.
Okay, let me ask you this then, Mike. Have we talked to our legislative body? Jason Shelby?
About funding?
Yes, about some funding.
Our funding from no, I have not talked to them about funding for day-to-day operations. I did talk to them about funding to help us put a roof on the old part of the property. but, not about day-to-day funding. But we do, some of the funding is coming from the state agency. And when we talked with them last year, they told us, y'all just get ready to fundraise because our funds are being cut, so your funds are gonna get cut. That's what they told us. So we've amped up our fundraising. We had the fly-in thing, and of course, we were told that it was gonna be several $1,000s, and it wound up being less than 10, which helped,
Oh, yeah.
but, it wasn't anywhere near what we were expecting. We've got, 3 or 4 other fundraiser plans in the works, but like I said, it takes our employees away from, the one that's major, fundraising person is also our billing person. When she's not billing for services provided, then, that doesn't help us.
Did you go to the city also?
I did go to the city, when I was looking for the, money for the freezer, and was told that they have instituted a policy not to fund any nonprofit organization. So, basically, the answer is no from the city.
And you don't think you'll get any money from them for the food part either?
No, because we're nonprofit. So that's a blanket, deal. By the way, I'm running for city council, so maybe. Hopefully changes in the wind, but right now, the answer is no. And I understand that. We're all fighting this increased wage, gas price, all of it. The food, cost of the food, we're all fighting that. But we are a state-regulated entity, and we do need public funds. I mean, I don't, be honest with you, I really don't know how much longer we can keep the doors open if we don't get some funding from somewhere.
Does the state say you have to have the doors open, or?
Yes, 8 to 5 every day, every weekday, yes.
Jim, the state mandates that you stay open and cuts your funding?
We have a contract with the state agency.
Is it a funded contract?
Based on our billing, based on the services that we provide. We bill for the services that we provide, and they reimburse us.
Does that include your admin costs and all these other expenses?
Supposedly, we sent a request that our meal cost was $14, and they cut it back to 10.
So they're really not fully funding?
No, they don't fully
But
fund.
then they're mandating that you stay open. I don't think that's the way this should work. I mean, because my thing about it is, if the federal government doesn't have the money to support the senior center, and the state doesn't have the money to support the senior center, I know the county doesn't have the money to support the senior center. So, I mean.
Well, may I say that in the past, you did give support to the senior center?
And in the past, it sounds like the state and the federal government did also, but they're not currently.
I don't know about that. I just know that the county did and the city did.
Right. Well, and I understand what the current budget is, and I don't think there's any money budgeted for the senior center.
No, sir, and I think from what I recall, years ago, the county, the board at that time did take the stance. Now, I don't think it was codified into policy, but the board did stop funding nonprofits as well. And I believe that the nonprofit agencies were basically instructed to work with the United Way. Have you worked with the United Way?
And they used to give us a nice funding, but they have cut it way, way down. So we do not get what we used to get from them.
Do you know why?
I'm sorry?
Do you have an explanation why
No.
the funding was cut?
I don't. I think focus more on the children than they do the elderly,
What do you do?
for one thing. You know. Other than that, I couldn't answer the why.
So that sounds like then the federal government, the state government, and the United Way has cut
Drawing support.
your funding.
Thank you. And we're struggling, we really are.
I see. But then the state mandates that you stay open a certain amount of hours.
Our contract with them says your office, your place will be open 8 to 5 every day.
But there's no specified amount that they're committed to fund in that requirement?
No, it's all based on the services that we provide.
I think her
Like I
answer is
said-
yes. She's telling you she has a contract with the state that lays out their funding. And as part of that funding, they have to offer that service, so they have to stay open during certain periods of time. It's very much akin to a project that we would give the state of Florida that says we're gonna fund X% of it, but you gotta complete it in order to get that funding. That's what I think she's saying.
We have to bill for everything that we do. We have to, for every meal that we serve, every time a person goes into the home to, you know, to provide services there, all of it, we have to bill each thing that we do.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairperson,
Yes, ma'am.
I'm wondering if it would be helpful if we reach out to our legislative delegation on behalf of the Senior Citizen Center and see if they can help us understand why your funding is not adequate, just to make sure, or why.
We were told that the federal government had cut state funding and the state funding cut our funding. That came from the agency that we work through, Agency on Aging.
It may be helpful for us to reach out to our representative
Sure.
and our senator to see if they could, you know, give us any explanation or any suggestions.
Okay. Any more discussion? We need a motion for that? Two.
No, I can reach out to Representative and Senator Osley's staff and see if they can offer us any assistance at all. I'll be happy to do that.
We're gonna do that. And I reckon you'll be back next month to see what our,
I will. But now, do you have a policy of not funding any nonprofit organization? I can understand that. You're not a benevolent agency. I understand that. However, we are basically an arm of a state agency. So we are under government contract. And to me, that includes government funding.
you know what? I know your position. I'm on the board. I hear the cry every day. But even if we decide to try to do something, I don't think I can vote because it'd be a conflict of interest.
Yeah, I know you can't vote.
But, you know, I don't know who you go to. We're at the mercy of everybody. Okay.
I understand. We're all up against it, and I understand that. But I'm just telling you, if we don't get some help from somewhere, I honestly don't know how much longer we can keep the doors open. And it's important, I mean, these people,
Yeah.
they probably wouldn't eat if they couldn't come out there, you know. And plus the socialization that they get is so important. Thank y'all.
Okay, thank you.
The little brochure that I left up there for you was just to show you some of the services that we do provide, because we do more than just a meal.
Okay, thank you. We go to number 60. The board to consider approval of request for funding to enhance school security as requested by Mike Anderson. Okay.
My name is Mike Anderson. I'm a small business owner here in Perry, Florida. I gave a similar presentation to the city that yours, I think it's been in the paper, but I'm gonna just hit some highlights if you don't mind. I'll take that much of your time.
Go ahead.
I would like to thank you guys for everything that you do for us. We would like to go ahead and let you know that us business owners and citizens are behind you. and our law enforcement, and that we've placed a great burden on your shoulders, and that's to protect us and our children. Now, if we have the same situation, and I bring this up because of the Uvalde shooting, which resembles our city and our town. It's a very small city, very small town. The mistakes that were made after the shooting, the cost of liability of a school shooting versus what we can do now to maybe prevent the loss of life or reduce our liability. Right now, there is a security assessment with the schools. It's an older assessment. The security officer, the school security officer, Marty and the sheriff and Jamie Cruz all get together on that. And sadly, the only funding that we have for that has been $47,000 a year from the state. So I've talked to Paul Dahl. He and Christy both say we have to prioritize. And like I said, prioritizing is like gambling. You're just going to hope that you have the correct measures in place. Now, I'm not going to ask you for $1 million. I didn't ask the city. The minimum I would ask for school hardening is that we at least look at the school grant and maybe at least match some portion of it or match the whole $47,000. Because number one, right now, we're 3 separate entities right here, city, county, school. And as long as everything's going fine, it's going to remain that way. But if we have a school shooting, lack of funding is not a defense, period. If you have a presence there, we are all going to have to pay for it. Let's make sure we don't have that presence or reduce it. The school hardening, Marty Tompkins, if I can ask him a question. Marty, are you aware of things that need to be done at the schools to enhance our security?
Yes.
Okay. Have we had any credible threats referencing school shootings that you've investigated?
Yes.
Okay. So the risk is here already. We've just been lucky so far, just like everyone else. Now, the small town aspect of it, I'm going to go ahead and tell you, the cost of a school shooting to most, they're already talking about taking out the elementary school. How much does the elementary school cost? It costs Columbine and Sandy Hook $50 to $100 million per school. Everything every school shooting that we've had that's been at this level has been between $50 and $100 million. So number one, if we don't enhance this, do we have the liability insurance that will cover our county? That handles intentional acts or acts of terrorism or actual school shooter umbrella. We need to make sure we've got that. Now, at the minimum, I've talked to the city, I've talked to the sheriff. The sheriff is responsible for security at the school, if I'm correct. You guys fund $500,000, they fund $500,000 for the school resource officer. Now, each school shooting is different. Each school shooting, we've seen different things. I took active shooter training. Just like I said, it was a fun day of shooting paintballs down the hall. It wasn't a reality. There wasn't 100 kids, 1,000 kids running around with blood and gun smoke on the floor. It just didn't happen. It doesn't happen that way. We can't predict what that shooter's going to do. It can either be a sniper, it can be someone that crashes through the gate or comes through the front door, or it can be little Billy that brings his .40 caliber in his backpack. We need to try to at least look at everything and be as prepared as we can for that. Now, I've asked the city, I want to ask you guys, and I've talked to Marty and the sheriff. We put a man in that school. We also have Point of Grace. We also have 6 schools that we take care of. And the reason I mention Point of Grace is because we will be responding there. And you will have liability there. So at the minimum, you know, the big thing about these shooters and the school officers and everybody, the media turns on them, the mob turns on them, their own mayor turns on them, their own governor turns on them. I'm not going to allow that. Not from us. So instead of saying he was a coward, the school resource officer that may or may not be tactically trained, he may just be officer friendly, like our kids, we don't want to, militarize our schools, but let's at least put the equipment on campus, and that includes a private school, of a minimum of a shield and a breach tool. Because I'm guaranteeing you, no matter what the media says, no matter what the governor says, no matter what the mayor says, they forego those officers. They threw those officers right there. Y'all gonna throw him under the bus within 72 hours. That's the time of damage after a shooting, not counting the shooting, is 72 hours because the mob's coming. Their whole police force is in hiding. 19 officers are in hiding. A poor woman teacher is in hiding because of the media, the politicians, and the rampant social media mob. The other thing I would like to ask is if you give any statements, do you guys, I know they usually go for the mayor. I don't know how it works with the council, but I've asked them that we provide you with training to deal with post-incident management. And that way, that will give you the same tool as we're trying to give him. So I'm going to ask at least for that and a minimum of 1 shield and 1 breach tube on site. And that includes Point of Grace. I've spoken with them already. They're very interested. They do have public or private security, but that would be handled between the sheriff's department, the police department of that tactical. But if we have that on site, even Barney Fife is going to be able to go and save those kids at the minimum. That makes him a superhero. And if that suspect breaches into a door, we're ready to go. So they're going to think of anything that they can come up with and not cost us $1 million, but it'll be cheaper if we spend maybe 50, 60, 70,000 each than $100 million. And that's what I'm asking. But most of all, it will save our children's lives and and lower their risk of death and harm. So that's what I'm asking you to consider. Now today I talked with other business owners. Dave Gorby with Head Turners, he donated $4,500 worth of radio equipment. I'm going to donate. Our office has donated $1,000 for school hardening, $500 to the city, and I'm going to donate $500 to the sheriff right now. I would ask that you guys consider anything we can do to help you. Swan Insurance, Swan Bail Bonds over across the street. Feel free to call me at any time. And Ray Curtis actually has some ideas of how we're going to handle the donations from private citizens. Okay? Well, thank you for your time. If you have any questions.
I do.
Yes, sir.
Have you met with the school board?
Yeah, not the actual school board. I met with the safety officer and Coach Dow. They are required to provide the security enhancements.
Certainly.
Right, and they have the taxable income to do that. That's my understanding. It's their responsibility to tax for that. What I'm asking is for minimum that we look at, because we've toured the schools, Marty, Chief and I. There are still some open areas that won't be too expensive to fix, but we've only got 2 months till the new school year. So like I said, I don't know that he's gonna have time to tax everybody to fix what they've got. Christy's down at school right now, or she was last week, just for this kind of thing. So.
Well, I mean, I guess one question I have is in meeting with the sheriff's representation and chief of police, I believe it was.
Yes, sir.
Those folks meet with the superintendent. Is that right? Is that who meets together and having these kind of, open forum type discussions?
Yes.
And is there a process in that that's annually, semi-annually, that would recognize those kind of risks? I mean, I'm all about the safety for the kids. I don't think that's a question.
I can answer
I'm
part of
just
that.
trying to understand the process.
But there is a safety assessment. They go through the school once a month or something like that.
So monthly?
I think so, monthly they go through and look at things.
Each school?
Each school is required by the
Each
state.
school is required by the state, yes.
So I guess one question is, have these things been identified before?
I don't want to get into what's been identified and what hasn't been identified because it's
It's a
an
security.
obvious security issue.
Well, I'm not trying to pinpoint what those are.
Yes.
I'm just trying to understand if this kind of need and the cost of what that is has been established previously.
That's my
Is that a
understanding.
fair assessment?
Yes.
Chuck Mincy, during his time here, Chuck and them, they did a security assessment. That assessment has been done. And they're having to go with the minimum amount of $47,000 a year is my understanding, since the time of the Parkland shooting. So it's maybe been 3 or 4 years.
Some time.
Yeah, but the money takes a little time to get here. But you gotta think, we got 6 schools here. That's not a lot of money. And we can't come up with the money all the time. What we're offering is the locals, Sonny Parker, he's got some fab shop guys, we've got some equipment guys that we can get, that we will help and donate money as necessary to help with the problem. That's what I'm here for, and just to ask for a minimum requirement of at least the shield and the breach tool in each school, including the private school.
What would the cost of that be equipment be?
They'd have to get those together. There's several different types of shields. They have caster shields that they have to be rated for rifle is the problem. And that could be a little bit more expensive. So if we give them that on that site with the training to use it, not just once a year paintball gun, that's not gonna do it. Then we can maybe enhance it, get with whatever the other projects that they have in there we can't discuss, but it can be useful, very useful, as we've seen in this Uvalde thing. I mean, it was right there. They're waiting for equipment. Waiting for equipment. Why are we waiting for equipment when we could just simply have a shield and a Halligan tool? I don't know, a Halligan tool maybe $300 or $400.
Probably not even that.
Not even that much. A Halligan's nothing. Shield, I would estimate under 2,000, maybe.
Probably about 1,500.
Yeah.
Okay, is that piece of metal we're talking about, shield?
The shield is just a portable ballistic shield, it's like, it would cover from here to down to here. It's something you can carry. And if they get into, see, if we're hard, the problem is we're hard in schools, but we don't think about what if he goes to plan B when you don't know what he's doing, and he goes behind that hardened door. And we're stuck outside, or y'all are stuck outside with no way in. So we're never gonna stop this kind of thing, ever. We can just minimize it. Let's hold him outside long enough, keep him outside long enough to allow them to take him out. And once he gets in, let's give him some security, some measures to go take him out right there.
So that equipment at $3,000 would be $21,000 for the equipment for 7 sites?
It's just an
Seven
estimate.
shields, that'd be an estimate.
Just ballpark.
Yeah, that'd be an estimate.
To have that equipment on site.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to have it. You don't know if you're gonna go charging into gunfire or not. You can get on Facebook, drunk in your underwear all day and say you're going to.
Well, certainly, you would say fairly, you wouldn't be waiting for that equipment to arrive on the scene.
Correct.
You would have it now. I think the training would be necessary to know where it's at so that you can make those things happen.
And if you have it at Point of Grace, you have to coordinate with their security as well. So I say let's take the.
Hold on, let's see.
Just a quick question. Marty, I'm gonna put you on the spot, but are you familiar at all with House Bill 1421? The Governor DeSantis just signed it, and it allocates $210 million for school safety, which includes school hardening grants and youth mental health awareness and assistance training. Do you know if there's a match for these funds? Is that where?
I don't, and that would go to the school board anyway, that would not go to us. So.
I just didn't know if anyone was aware of this,
Yeah.
of these additional funds.
City manager, in fact, we talked about that as well.
Okay,
But how long is it gonna take to get those funds is my concern.
right.
And we got 2 months. You just never know. We may be lucky and never have to worry about it. We may be. But do we want to risk that with our kids? I don't think we do. There's some shoring up that can be done on the outsides of some of these schools that can help us. And we can go from there. We got some good security measures in place. I just think we need to add just a little bit more. See what we can do. So I've told them, chief, sheriff, and the, safety officer can get together and they can present to you guys, whatever. I appreciate your time, okay? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. With this, that being said, LaWanda, can you bring this back next month on? Agenda items that we need to look at?
Do you want it for your next meeting, or do you want,
But probably the next one.
or maybe bring it to the July workshop?
Yeah, yeah.
And then we can gather some information.
I'm all right with it. Okay. All right, thank you. Boy, Go to constitutional officers, governmental units. Board to consider approval of Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. DAC amendment as requested by Jack Smith, Florida Area Supervisor, Florida Forestry Service. Mrs. Smith.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
This is a statute that you have to pay. I'll start that out. In the statutes that you pay it unless. This is a big deal. This is what, 34, what's the bill on? I'm sorry,
32 something?
32 something. You say $35,000 for like what does it cost you to fund a structure firefighter for the county? One person. About $34,000. Or the salary? Yes. For a salary? Yes, sir. That's not, well, no, I mean, but that's just pay.
Yeah, okay.
With this bill that you have to pay by statute, you're getting 7 trained firefighters. $4 or $5 million worth of equipment to fight fire in the county. And I can keep going and keep going. If that ain't enough, you're gonna get equipment from 4 more counties that are close by. And if that ain't enough, the rest of the state's coming.
Okay.
And if that ain't enough, the federal government's coming, guaranteed.
Okay.
To be on fire. And I'm just trying to point a picture of what you're getting. This is a lot of money.
Mr. Chairperson, if I can, Jack, I think the only question, this was tabled from the last meeting, was because there was a reduction in the number of acres. Right, so, I know we pay this every year and we are grateful for our partnership. The only question was why the number of acres was reduced. And I think that was, from how you explained to me, the fact that some of the areas were lost because they either maybe fall under state ownership or they were developed. Is that accurate?
That would have been self-destruct.
Okay. Did we discuss that?
But I just I'm not trying to get away from what you're saying or anything, but my point is what you're getting for this money is a huge amount. Yes, sir. You would hurt my feelings a whole bunch if you asked me to pay this money out of my pocket. But the benefit that the taxpayers are getting, I will back up. If you told me I had to pay you that, I said, go ahead and put them on, because I'm going to leave. That's just point blank. I ain't paying. Can't pay it. But this is what you are getting for
520,000 acres.
Right.
Protection. For $31,915.
Yes, all this equipment, manpower that's gonna be at your disposal, or our disposal to combat the fire.
Sure.
Yes, sir.
I did talk with, Mr. Smith, and this reduction is basically marshlands and things of that.
You have a map in your folder?
I don't have a pretty colored one, I've got a black and white one here, it's on the back page of the packet, this map. But I think if we look at that, these are lowlands and areas that are on the coastline that
are still gonna be responded to, they're just not included in what the cost is, if I understood correctly.
Correct.
So it's not any more of a risk in respect to the public, because the fire will still be responded to. It's just not mandated in this group of acreage.
Okay.
So if I understood that right, the taxpayer really is benefiting in the sense that this reduction is here. It doesn't lessen the coverage. It only lessens the fact of the risk and what we're talking about in this acreage. So if there's more discussion, I'd be glad to hear it, but if there's not, I'd make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
I just got one comment.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, sir. Sorry. This could be due to better mapping, more technology, but like Mr. Newman said, this is all out there on the coastline, and especially from Steenhatchee to the Osceola River.
Like Hickory Mountain area, and management area down there.
It's the whole coastline, honestly, except for one little section, and it could be mud. It's just, I just wanted to come before you, I should have been here the last time, to let you know, and the public know, the potential of what you could be getting. I'm a taxpayer too, I don't want to see my money get away.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Yes, sir.
All in favor, saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, got it.
Thank you.
Second. Number 18. The board to consider approval of the Big Bend Water Authority proposed budget for 2022-2023 fiscal year as agendaed by Mark Rutter, General Manager.
Morning.
Morning.
Good to see all of you. Back at it again this year. Let me give you a little update of what's been accomplished so far. From 2021 to today, we have installed 46 water meters, new water customers, and 26 new sewer customers so far. With an added revenue of about $30,000 this fiscal year. We are continually growing. At this point, we are tripling the capacity of our sewer plant, which should be done probably fall. We're having issues with getting materials, but they are working on it. Last year, our revenues were 1.8 million. We had expenses of 1.3 million, with a decrease in that position of about 468,000. Costs have been going up, been spending money, been adding infrastructure. And our budget reflects a new employee, a new truck, and a new mini excavator. It all comes together. As long as expenses have been going up like everybody else, at this point, as long as we're doing a little bit, we should be fine. And I just need you to, the board has approved this, Dixie County has approved the budget, I just need you guys to approve it for me and move on for another year. Any questions?
I'll second that motion, but for discussion's sake, you guys are adding on an employee such because of the growth and the things that's going on there.
Yeah, we're thin right now, so we hope, I have to find somebody first, so you know how that goes. I'm real particular when it comes to hiring people.
But given the additional capacity with the sewer plant, as well as these listed extra customers and the continued growth in that area, that's the justification.
Yes.
Personnel and equipment.
Yeah, and we've always been down, we've been down a guy for a while, and I just, like I said, it's really hard to find that person.
Okay, did I hear a motion? Did I hear a second?
Yep.
All in favor, saying aye?
Yes, sir. Appreciate it, guys.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Open number 19, board to discuss recreational vehicle density as agendaed by Commissioner Moody.
That's right. I wanted to get the feeling of the board on, the density business on the per acre or per parcel for the home. I've had a lot of people contact me from the beach and Cincinnati area about, a gentleman, I have one home there, and he'll have 3 or 4 camper trailers in the yard. One man said he had 4 on one side and 2 on the other side, and 2 houses adjacent to his, you know. And, I was just wanting to get a feeling of the board and see if we're interested in lowering density as far as the number of camper trailers you can have on the lot now. I want it to be where my feeling is, if a family member wanted to put one there, that'd be a different story. I wouldn't want them to be held up for, your son or your daughter, or your mother or something, put them on the camper trailer and put on the property, but I just, having 4 is kind of much, I like, now, that's just my opinion. But I want to get.
Do we have ordinance on this?
We do have an ordinance, yes, and I think what Commissioner Moody is suggesting is that you change your ordinance to restrict, RVs in some way or another. And the way our ordinance is written in our comp plan, well, here's our subject matter expert.
Just in time.
The question was, the methodology in which to address RV density. And I was just starting to explain that, but I would love for you to take the floor. If the board wished to lower the RV density.
You'd have to amend the ordinance that presently says 2011, I believe, when it was adopted.
Okay.
I get people on both sides of the aisle. Some people are for it, you know, having up to 4 camper trailers on a home site down there. There's a lot of people against it, you know, it's kind of up and down. I just, right now you can have 4, is what I'm reading, right? You can have 4 camper trailers
You can have 4 on a parcel of 1/2 acre or more.
This is in a residential neighborhood, you can have 4 camper trailers on 1/2 acre or more.
The ordinance allows 1 per 5,000 square feet, so it's not absolutely a 1/2 acre, but it's close enough. It's approximate.
And also +1 during the scallop season.
Now, 4 is the maximum. You become an
No,
RV.
it's 1 per 5,000 +1.
You can't have more than 4. You have an RV park if you have more than 4. The additional 1 for scallop season applies up to you reach 4. That's the maximum.
Right, but I was saying, so if you had 1 on 5,000 feet during this time, you could also have an additional.
That's the way the ordinance presently reads.
Okay.
Assumption of this probably would be, some of these campers that may move in may be short-term, just for the season that's going on, that folks are moving in. I would surely put more restriction on folks that, that they couldn't do, what they wanted with their property. I mean, we approved campgrounds to have over 100 RVs on it, and I don't know why would we restrict an individual from having, being able to run by our ordinance today and have them full of, and like I wouldn't imagine that a lot of this is folks having, now some could be, but a lot of this is probably isolated to the season. I know there was a campsite of a group camping over near me last year, and they got kids. I think they were probably 9, and they were supposed to have 4, but they had to remove 5 of them. And
And if that was an isolated, they was gonna be there for 3 months, but they had to find other alternatives for the fine. And I understand that, but I surely wouldn't want to put any more restrictions on individuals and what they can do with their property.
Mr. Chairperson, I just repeating some of what I've heard from the public is that in some of our areas, RVs are being moved in, and it's not just for a seasonal period of time, it's for an extended period of time. And these RVs are possibly being rented out, or they're being inhabited long-term. So I know what we've heard in the past, that this could possibly have a negative effect on other homeowners who may have a site-built home. Plus, you're not capturing the revenue of what could be full-time residents. You're not capturing revenue that you would capture if you had a site-built home. So if you think in terms of future growth and some of the ways that we've seen are some areas in our county being more populated, that does create more calls for service, and we don't necessarily capture the revenue in order to fund that. So if I'm understanding the question is do we want to try to put some mechanism in place to slow that down? And that's the question. Is that correct, Commissioner Moody?
Yes, ma'am. Mr. Noon, your area down there that's been acting at the beach area, what feedback do you get from the people on that having further business down there?
I get both directions. Folks that have those, like Mr. English is saying, are fans of the sort. Like Mr. Wanda said, there are concerns about that from homeowners that say those kind of continuations in the long term could minimize their values, and they're concerned about that. So I can't tell you there's a tightrope to walk across. I guess one question I would have for all parties involved is, how do, if we're gonna say you're gonna consider changing that or moving that in the liability sense or the legality part of that, what ensues if you consider moving that? I mean, for folks that are enjoying that benefit.
They have some grandfather problems. You understand what I'm saying about grandfather?
Yes, the terms that are currently in place.
Yeah, and people rely on that.
But any new one would have to go under different guidelines, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, with the grandfathering in business, if the house sold that was renting the 4 spaces, the trailer next to it, would that grandfather business go away at that point?
I believe Gulf County adopted an ordinance that had some very specific guidance that addressed that. If the property changed hands or similar circumstance, then you would lose that grandfather provision.
You put language into that doesn't run with the land.
Correct. And I know currently with our current ordinance, there's a grandfathering provision, and you've had to track properties for 10 years plus.
Still tracking.
Right, because we did not have that provision. If the property changed hands, you lost that grandfather provision.
What we're seeing on my end is people are discovering they can put 4 campers on parcels in the agricultural areas like Ocean Pond, Strickland Landing, places like that. And what they want to do is rent out 3 of them and have one for themselves. And that may not be what the board had in mind when those regulations were adopted. Whereas if they were allowed 1 RV on their land, that gives them, in my mind, a reasonable use of property. But doesn't make it tempting to try to make it a rental property, which it probably should not be, in my humble opinion.
It puts a stress on the infrastructure as far as garbage dump and the roads and the marinas and the boat ramp. You know, the more people you get down there, we're overwhelmed at our boat ramps now for a short period of time during school season. You know, that's where we're overwhelmed now. And I brought this up, I wanted everybody to get an idea, get their opinion on it, an idea of what we could, where we're going. Because it's gonna get more and more, it's not gonna get less.
Mr. Chairperson, if I may, in 2021, we issued 131 RV permits. And
In the entire county?
In the entire county. In 2022, year-to-date, there have been 97 issued.
That's less than 6 months.
Right. Now, breaking it down by parts of the county, there were 7 in Perry, 38 Steenhatchee, 52 at the beaches, which includes what areas, Danny?
Leisure retreats, Deerwood at the beaches, Yates Creek Road, all of those, we just categorize as beaches as a location.
And last year, there were 79 total in the beaches location.
I think when storms come through, and I don't think RVs is what people have problems with, washing up on their property. I mean, I think all that gets pulled out. I think what folks have issues with is people's junk that they leave around the bottom of their houses that they don't remove.
Right.
And, a lot of it be for the RV on it, and a lot of it be for the house. Something that can be removed, that piece of dirt is valued at the same as this piece of dirt here. That wouldn't devalue that under something that could be pulled off.
I don't disagree that in the coastal high hazard areas, that it's nice to have RVs there that can be pulled away from that area. I think what we're seeing is an increase in the rural areas of RVs, because I don't know that you could saturate the beaches area any more than they're saturated now with RVs.
There's not a whole lot of room left in the coastal high hazard area. And what the board adopted as far as their density pretty much equates to single-family dwelling density, where you have water and sewer in those areas. But we're seeing it start to really increase in the rural area. I'm just not sure if that's the direction the board had in mind.
So you're seeing these RVs as being used as a single-family dwelling on a half-acre lot or something like that?
I don't think most of them are used as a dwelling, which are not dwelling units, and most of them are not used as dwelling units, but many are there for pretty long-term use. And there are a lot of them we know get rented. We're not involved in that, but we know they do.
Okay. All right. Do we have anyone from the public who want to speak to this, talk about it? Come and give your name and we'll got you.
My name's Tom Ferguson. I live at 3788 Strickland Landing Drive, Perry. And I want to look at this from the standpoint, I think the board is at a crossroads right now. You can move toward encouraging subdivisions that, and I'm talking about agricultural rural areas, we're just talking 5-acre lots, or average of 5-acre lots. And having somebody come in and build a site-built home and get the tax revenue from a $300,000 or $400,000 home potentially, or you can continue down the road of having RV sites in these areas. I live on Strickland Landing Drive. There's about 35 lots on that road. Strickland Landing was approved in 1997. There are 2 site-built homes on that road. But there's about 8 park model camper trailers sitting on a 5-acre lot, which are being used for dwelling. Some of them are occupied 6 months out of the year. Some of them are occupied full-time. Some of them are weekends, people coming down from Georgia, Alabama. But I don't think you can have both. I'm not of the opinion that somebody's going to buy a lot for for $75,000 or $100,000 and build a $200,000 house on it, and look out his bedroom window in the morning and see 4 camper trailers on the lot next to him, look out the other end of his house and see 4 more on that side. It ain't gonna happen. Nobody's gonna spend that kind of money to build a house when you got camper trailers next door. Especially if they're rented and you have to put up with the problems that you have with short-term rentals, the noise, the parties, and so forth. And I think rather than look at the density, I would prefer to see the county say, no, if it's a residential area, and what I'm talking about is rural, agricultural, rural residential, that you just stop this. But go to encouraging people to buy a lot, put a home on that lot, and not put a camper trailer on that lot.
Okay. Any more further discussion?
I don't mind looking further into it to try to understand it. I mean, but I don't have the same perspective that Mr. Griner does as far as volumes, so I don't see it every day. I see what I see on the ground, and I see how things are expanding. I'm not unadvised, if you will. I mean, I see those things, but I'm not in the same volume of, hey, there's this many permits, or these many folks put in poles, or things like that.
I can give you an example of how popular they are. There's an existing subdivision behind the geodesic dome house there at Sand Dollar Road. Sat there empty for 10 to 15 years. Half-acre lots, 45 or more lots. Then someone bought it and marketed it as RV lots, and they sold every one of them within a couple of weeks. And we've been issuing permits left and right. They are filling up with RVs. And it may be an outlier, but in the middle of all this going on, I issued a permit yesterday to build a home on one of those lots, right there in the middle of it. So, it surprised me too. I was like, what? So they are extremely popular. Yeah.
But given that, it seems like there are folks that are willing to build a home in those areas.
I think that's probably the exception rather than the rule, but it did happen.
Right there behind the waterworks on the beach road right there.
Oh,
Well, I wouldn't see too many folks buying a half-acre lot, not on the water somewhere with a view to build a home on a half-acre lot. Some will, but
It just don't happen.
that's just my thoughts about it. I mean, I don't, if I'm gonna go looking, I'm gonna look for acres to build me a house on.
you got that kind of road?
Yeah.
That revenue? So, I mean, I don't mind looking further into it.
Yeah.
Mr. Moody, I mean,
I want to bring this up, get y'all talk going on it, see where we can go with it, you know.
Okay.
I'm, kind of sitting on the fence with it myself. I hear both sides. I ask a lot of people that, and they, you know, some of them for it, some of them against it. So I'm just, wanting to get all y'all in get y'all's ideas and thoughts on it. You know, the reason I brought this up.
I mean, I think some of the issues are the costs that go along with having these type lots or those kind of coastal areas in respect to the requirements for elevated homes or having a road-ready RV that goes away in front of the storm instead of having to stay there to storm. So I do understand, and I think the majority of those cases, you do have a high volume of use, which does mean there's a high expectation of services, which puts a higher strain on this board and the services that this board is required to offer. So understanding those things, I'm not sure exactly how you can try to capture that issue in respect to the cost per service.
Because I think it should be washed out equally across all the residents, and all users, we might say. So if I had that magical formula, I'd certainly tell you what it was. But
I'm sure. Well, just like the garbage business, at least we've got that squared away. Each one of them each one of them camper trailers in that new subdivision behind the waterworks on the beach road, they're gonna be paying their fair share just like the person that's got a home.
Well, I think that's an example of one of those costs. You know, when that was set in place some time back, you know, it is what it is. But when you talk about the high volume of usage and the generating of solid waste that comes along with that, it generates a higher cost of business. So I don't think that's the only one.
You're gonna have ambulance service, you're gonna have fire trucks, you're gonna have everything.
Yeah.
That's gonna cost taxpayers money, you know, so I mean, it's just, that's where it's at. I just wanted to bring this up, get it out, that open, we could, you know, just think about it, you know.
I mean, if we could workshop that item as far as what those percentages are and try to understand more of what the cost is. I mean,
What percentages are you looking for?
well, I mean, I'd like to look further into these numbers as far as the permits and,
Okay.
you know, I guess a real snapshot of what areas are more prone to that kind of use, which would also tell us, I guess, how these services may be strained in those areas, how difficult it may be on our law enforcement or fire or rescue, things like that. Because, I mean, if they're in the most remote location, then that means that, to me, it makes it more challenging to get that service to those folks. And that means those costs are coming up. And then that means it also has a domino effect on, if you've got that commitment with county fire, and you have that engine or that personnel committed on the south end of the county, then you also have more risk and a more difficult time covering other areas. So those are the kind of things I'd like to try to understand with that.
I want a few minutes. I normally don't get involved with stuff like this, but y'all are talking. One, I'm a citizen of Taylor County. Jack Smith, live 8944 Beach Road. Proud to be here, been here for a long time. I don't want to see it change. I realize it's got to change. And I'm trying not to offend anyone that may or may not be here. But why do you want to come to Taylor County and make it like what you left from? Because you didn't like it. And I will stand by this to my dying day. If you don't like where you live, don't come to Taylor County and try to change it to make it like where you live from. Taylor County is a rural county that I think most people come here because it's rural and they don't want to see it develop. Don't bring your problems to Taylor County. And I will tell anybody that. That's Jack Smith speaking as a citizen of Taylor County. Now Jack Smith's going to speak for Florida Forest Service about these rural areas, putting RVs in them. It hasn't happened yet. It's gonna happen. We're gonna have a major fire. Like he said, the roads are not improved. You can't get equipment to it. You can't get firefighting equipment to it. Or much less county fires. We have one right now in the pit that takes us an hour to get to. No running water, no electricity, no mail service. That we're allowed to put RVs and mobile homes on sites that should never have been permitted to be developed because it's in a swamp. This is coastal land that is somewhat high and dry. But they're going in there, these half-acre lots, and clearing out a spot just big enough to put an RV. There is no protection for the home or the firefighter to save that home.
I'm not risking my life if you don't wanna take the effort to try to protect your piece of property. Not gonna ask one of my firefighters to. The homeowner has to take some ownership in protecting their property by making the roads good, access good, and clearing it out enough you have defensible space. This is the issues y'all are gonna run into issuing these permits in these rural areas.
Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you.
Mr. Plant, we don't have any place like that in Perry, do we? Taylor County, where there's no fire,
That's what he's talking
no
about.
electricity?
He's talking about Untitled County.
I thought he said Lafayette.
No, sir. No,
It's in the northeast corner of the county.
Taylor County is in northeast Taylor County. Yes, sir. Right. Several thousand acres.
You guys, the Ann County Fire have had to respond to that location.
The quickest way to get there is an airplane.
But I would point out that that was not approved as a development in Taylor County. They exercised an exemption to the definition of development by dividing properties into sizes larger than 15 acres on an existing road. So it was not approved through the mechanism of the planning board or the county commission, et cetera.
But we're still taxed with providing that service.
I don't know how you get around that.
Whether it was approved or not. Still got it.
Yeah, if they catch you fire, they'll need to be put out.
How many camper trailers in that area up there in the bay?
Mr. Booty, I should know the answer to that, but the only way you can know that is fly out with the airplane in Tri-County.
We've issued 8 addresses, I think, in that area, and on the few latest ones that I know we've issued, there may be 4 to 6 structures, what looks like is at each of those address locations.
And please don't take what I said as pointing fingers, because I'm not. Just trying to make you see the bigger picture. This is just one prime example up there.
Yeah.
But with these rural RV lots, your access, your ingress, everything, it's not gonna be there for the first responders to be able to get there to provide the service. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, the direction is board. You need further steps?
I would like to look into those kind of situations and see if we can get a better understanding of that.
Further study? Okay. Do we need a motion on the further study or?
Take direction, or if you'd like a motion, that's.
I think we can just discuss it in the July workshop.
Okay. Go to item number 20. The board to discuss June workshop special meeting agenda by county administrator.
Would you like to start at 13A?
Well, let's go to 13A.
So I'll get out of order here.
Okay.
Okay, 13A is, the request is for board approval to advertise for a public hearing as prepared, with the notice prepared by the county attorney. I received a new critical event schedule for the solid waste services assessment project over the weekend, and we must advertise for the public hearing on the draft ordinance by July 8th. We will not have another meeting between now and July 8th, so I asked to amend the agenda to include that. So that's, it's just simply asking the county attorney to prepare a legal advertisement and permission of the board to advertise. And that hearing would be held on July 19th.
Okay.
Now, that would not set the assessment. This is the new ordinance that will replace the ordinance that we currently have adopted.
We need a motion for instruction for the county attorney.
Yes, please.
Motion.
Second. Motion second, all in favor, saying aye.
So the public hearing would be July 19th,
Yes, sir.
so get that notice to you. I'm writing it down right now.
And you also have the draft ordinance, for the 44-page ordinance for your review.
I do, and wow. I guarantee you, if I was doing that, I wouldn't have a 44. I guarantee you.
It's a lot of reading, a lot of reading material.
Well, I think there's a lot of back and forth.
Yes, sir.
But, you know, I will read it, but like I said, and mine will be shorter.
All right, now you go back to 20.
20. We have a workshop scheduled for June 28th, but that is, you'll have 2 commissioners and your county administrator who will be traveling to Orlando that day. So my request is that either the board cancel the June workshop or reschedule for the first week of July. And I believe there were some scheduling conflicts for the first week of July. So unless there's something pressing that cannot wait until July 19th, I would just ask the board to consider canceling the June workshop.
Motion. Motion second, all in favor, say aye. July 19th.
Would be our next meeting.
Okay. All right, we go to 21.
This is just an informational item. I just wanted to bring the board up to speed of House Bill 53, which was adopted last year. There are requirements set in place to prepare a report to submit to the state on water and sewer 5-year plans. Or actually, it's a 20-year plan that's updated every 5 years. And really, I just wanted you to know that we were working with the City of Perry and with Taylor Coastal Water and Sewer District to gather this information. I'm relying heavily on Kenneth Dudley to help with the county, well, not only the county portion, but to help assimilate all the information. The requirement is this: we submit this report to the state by July 30th. I will, we can bring you a draft for the July workshop, but I imagine that it will take until July 30th to put all of this information together. It's quite a bit of information that we have to assemble, and it's a requirement. I don't see any way around it. But from what I understand, this is something important that we should participate in because future funding may be garnered on submitting this report.
So we got 2 water boards in the county, or 3?
Well, so Big Bend Water Authority is a dependent district, independent district, so they submit their own report.
That's the one that's Coastal.
Yes, Taylor Coastal Water and Sewer District is an independent district, dependent district, so they submitted their information to us in the format needed to send to the state, and the City of Perry is gathering their information as well.
All right.
So no, sir, I just wanted to.
Information.
Yes.
All right.
Information.
The next one is the board should consider approval of draft sports complex rental package as agendaed by county administrator.
This is to ask for approval of a formal document that would set pricing for field rental and rental of lights, and also provide manpower. Mainly for tournaments, so we can have some pricing in place for tournaments or any other field usage. If it's a nonprofit type venture, it would allow the county administrator to waive fees as we do for other facilities. But this is a document we've been working on probably for a year with T-Crab to make sure our pricing was in line with other counties.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor, saying aye. Aye. Okay. Board to discuss project priority for submission to the local support grant program as agendaed by the county administrator.
I received a text last week informing me of this new program, which is the Local Support Grants Program. And my request is that the board consider one of the legislative appropriation requests that was submitted for consideration in the last few months. to be considered for additional funding. So basically, it's another bite at the apple for the projects that we submitted. I don't know that it's required that we resubmit one of our projects, but because of the timeline, it would be much easier for staff if we could simply resubmit one of the projects where we've already done, gathered all the documentation, it's in the same format, and I believe we could meet the deadline if we were able to resubmit one of the projects. Now, if you'll recall, when the board ranked these projects previously, the first priority was the sports complex. That was the addition of another softball field. That total was $466,400. That was not funded. The second priority was the fire station shortfall. This is for the station on Fiscal Road. That was $700,000 that we requested. That was not funded. The third priority was the improvements to the courthouse. $510,000 of that request was funded, so we will receive the funding for that. And then the fourth priority was a new station in Steenhatchee, and that was $1.4 million. So I'm going to ask the board to consider resubmitting one of these projects, and we can only submit one. So I need direction from the board of which project to submit.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Isn't the funding for the sports complex gonna be included in the next FERDAP request?
Yes, we had planned to submit another, well, that's the board approved, that we submit another FERDAP grant application for that project, correct? Now, that's $200,000 cap. And the board had previously agreed to fund the balance of that if we receive that grant award.
And I think that was part of this consent, to close out those existing
That was for the
projects
site
that you
dedication.
could really apply
Yes,
in the
we're
next.
working on a closeout now. And the grant, the application cycle was bumped up a bit, which is making us a little bit anxious. But we're working on that submittal process as well as the closeout process.
So, and then the majority of the courthouse issues were funded.
Yes, $510,000.
So I think it then comes down to these two fire stations. Is that fair to understand? And one of those is $1.4 million.
Yes,
What was the other?
700.
$700,000.
That was Steenhatchee.
No,
That's Spanish Station 2, I believe it is.
Right, the new station.
Is there funding, I believe in the MSTU fund that could cover that $700,000 cost?
I believe there is funding in the reserve for equipment line item that would cover the $700,000.
I would suggest that this board look at that to complete that project and submit for the Steenhatchee station for this consideration.
Now, the $700,000 to complete, that was based upon the previous proposals. I don't know what's happening, construction prices continue to escalate, but that was what we thought at the time would be needed to complete that station. If we rebid that project, re-advertise that project, I don't know where we'll come in at.
So we got $560,000 to start with, and we need 700 more to finish it, right?
That's what we believe.
I think in that,
That's what we're estimating.
we're demonstrating to these folks that are considering this legislation that this board is willing to basically take care of this cost to secure this piece of infrastructure and request that they help us with this additional piece of infrastructure. So I guess if I need to make that motion, I'd make a motion to fund the shortfall in the Station 2 project and request the appropriation for the 1.4 million. Is that correct?
We may need to bring that back to ask for approval to utilize reserves.
But you need to get direction for.
Yes, sir.
So.
Is that gonna be on the same location as what's there now?
Yes, sir. So that part of that project is to build up that area because it floods
That's what I was gonna say, I saw it flooded.
So the understanding that I have is that's to elevate that site so that the flooding potential is minimized and to put in place a firehouse with quarters for the ambulance that's housed there and the firefighters with the equipment.
I thought I was told that any place that was flood prone, you couldn't build in it, or nobody would contribute anything toward it. Was that what they were told out there on Grambling Lane, that flood area? They wanted lime rock or something, they just wanted lime rock, right?
I'm not sure.
But in order to build up, Steve Hatch, I'm not against the fire station, but why would we go to a flood-prone area to build a fire station? $1 million and something dollars? No.
It was already there, what it was.
Right.
And it's flooded twice in the last 5 years. But before that, like some of the old timers down there told me, it's been 40 years they haven't seen water like that.
Right.
So, I
It's
mean,
just to try to harden that area so that you don't have that kind of issue and you've got the response option.
Are we, on track to finish these jobs at the complex in order to reapply for the FERDAP?
We are hoping to pay any outstanding invoices at the July 11th meeting, so we can turn around and complete everything that we need to submit for closeout. The agency knows that we are trying to get everything closed out and that we wish to resubmit. Unless there's, unless I can't predict what's going to happen, the remainder of June, but that's our hope.
But we do have contractors, I guess, in line to.
They're on site, yes. All we have left at this point is the installation of the batting cages, and I believe they're on site. They started last week, and planting the native vegetation, and we have a contractor that's working on that. The plants have been delivered. They just have to be planted. And then, of course, the board approved the site dedication today. But it's very tight.
I'll do it.
Okay. Do we need you made a motion?
Is that what you need, Ms. Warren?
Yes.
So you need a motion just for this appropriation consideration?
I would say, and then if you wish to consider funding the shortfall, either during budget workshops or at a future meeting.
So I'll make a motion that a request for consideration be the Steam Hatch Fire Station project.
Okay, motion second, all in favor saying aye?
Aye.
Okay.
We will get that submitted to the state. And that's all I have.
That's all you have?
That's all I have, and thank you.
Okay, concerns from the public. Anybody from the public got some concern? Go ahead.
It's on the same issue, but they were talking about the frequency of RV sites. There is currently a application that is in process to put in a new subdivision at the end of Strickland Landing Drive. And that proposed subdivision was going to put 4 RV sites on every one of 45 lots in that subdivision. So that alone would have potentially bumped the number by 180 lots. Now, I say that was proposed, that was on the applicant's website, which has changed a couple of times, so I don't know what that applicant's really planning on doing now. But he's still got 45 lots on a 245 acre parcel. But he originally set it up as a marketing tool to get people to consider those lots because they could put 4 RV sites on them and make money. And so that's in the pipe right now. The planning board has approved the preliminary site plan for that subdivision.
Okay. Now, anyone else? Just a number. Commissioner
No,
number.
sir, I don't have anything else, Mr. Chairman.
Mercer, don't.
Well, I'll say one thing about what he just spoke about. For them to build that subdivision they want to build there, they're gonna have to pave the streets. They're gonna have to be up to state standards as far as the paving goes. But we've got a road that we milled all the way from Spring Warrior Road all the way into this subdivision that's gonna have new pavement. It's milling, all it is. And you get 200 residences there coming and going on that milling road, and motorhomes, you know, big heavy motorhomes and one thing another coming and going there. They're gonna ruin our milling road. That's gonna be an expense to the taxpayers over a period of time. And that's what we're looking at right there, what he's talking about.
Can that be passed to that development?
Do what?
Could that be a requirement that's placed on that development?
When they get to us to have to get this approved, that's one thing that we need to
I mean, I know, you know, several areas that have those assessments.
I don't know how that'll work out as far as legal wise to make them pave that road from Spring Warrior Road into their subdivision. Will that go into that?
So this is a little bit of how it's configured now. Strickland Landing is subject to an MSBU. So one statement that if the roads, if the infrastructure within that development is affected in any way due to additional impacts, it is not borne by taxpayers, it's borne by the owners of that development. Through their assessment. And that's why, like Mr. Ferguson here, that's why they have such a vested interest in this. The second thing is, when the development has made its way through the planning board, the next time you will see it is going to be in the format of a final plat. There's a lot of initiative to try to structure your decision on approval or denial based on Chapter 177. Does this plat conform to the statutory requirements? It doesn't delve into a lot of the nuances of it. You have to initiate that in order to discuss it. Staff has posed concerns relative to what was suggested and marketed, like he was referencing just a moment ago. I just caught the tail end of it when I come down. And the anticipated effect that it would have on that Strickland Landing, how they arrived at their concurrency requirements by using Spring Warrior Road as their level of comparison versus Strickland Landing Drive. So we've briefed these issues with the developer and told them, look, we believe that if you're going to do a single-family dwelling on each of these 45 lots and you're proposing to put 4 RVs on each of these lots, your proposed traffic impacts aren't as you have portrayed them. We believe you're going to require additional improvements on this stretch of road which you're using through them. The developer's preliminary plat says, 1, the Lazy Tortoise is going to be subject to an HOA, so they're going to be responsible for everything inside of there. They would like to be part of they used an MSTU as the reference, even though that's wrong, but as part of the Strickland Landing assessment. I think 1 or 2 lots of the new development are actually part of that Strickland Landing. So we got to figure out some of the legalities of how you take this boundary and then kind of encompass some additional areas. I don't think it's insurmountable. I think you can do it. I think it's appropriate that any impacts that are incremental due to this development coming through the other development should not be borne by the Strickland Landing assessment. We just got to figure out, and you guys are going to get a bite at the apple when we come back with the final plat, but we would have to put that in there. Just be well aware that the developer is going to try to narrow your focus and say you should only be looking at Chapter 177, because that's what they're going to do. Because there wasn't an appeal that I'm aware of necessarily that appealed the planning board's decision to you guys, and that's usually when you would have got into the mix of it.
So just in understanding the higher volume and the heavier traffic obviously is gonna have a greater impact on that Bill Road.
It will.
It's not,
The big problem-
I mean, at this moment, it's not being subjected to that same impact.
That's correct.
So in the additional impacts would come the cost that's affiliated with the new development. That's what I'm trying to get.
That's right. So you have to do it by looking at a potential traffic impact. We do that through, based on what it is you're putting down here. There's an associate, our code references the manual in order to determine what each of those would require from a trip, how many vehicles are running across that roadway. That's based on the single family units as well as the RV units that are being proposed in there. You add them all up. Are you getting well beyond what is already there? Are we at the threshold in which you would require a paved surface, of course, across there? So that's how I breached it. They kind of did a 180 real quick and said, oh, by the way, we're not going to go do all that. We're thinking it's never going to happen. So we don't want you to consider what we want to do. We want you to consider that, you know, maybe only a very small portion would happen and improve it based on that. And I told them that's not the way it works.
I think you have to consider the worst case. Because I mean, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
No worries.
The worst case
It's all
would
on
be
site.
you don't address that and then you get stuck with the bill and the cost to fix it.
I know if you, so the city charges for impact fee, they charge for the worst scenario.
Yeah.
So even before you put it in, you have to pay that impact fee.
They can do it on that size lots.
I mean, I don't throw off on them for giving that the educated try, but
I didn't either, and they asked me, you know, the guy sent me an email a couple of days ago and said, did you have any comment with respect to our new version? And I haven't responded. That was gonna be my comment, was no. I don't. You know, my position is not gonna change because the facts haven't changed.
right. Well, I mean, I think it's a reasonable consideration, okay? But currently, that's not what the mill road was put in place for. Those things are changing.
That's correct, and you do have RV allowances within that land use classification. Strickland Landing established covenants and restrictions initially that had some timing constraints on how long and how many you could have there. You know, if the new developer were to mimic those, I don't see how you could do anything more than just a traffic level impact. You couldn't say, you know, you shouldn't have this intensity of development there. But they haven't come forward with anything like that.
And
Ma'am.
quick question. When you determine the amount of the MSBU assessment MSBU assessment for a subdivision, do you take into account the potential added density of RVs?
Two answers. First, Strickland Landing is one that predates me, so I did not initiate that calculation. You know, our ordinance allows the developer to put forward what they think the development requires for that. So I wasn't a part of that. The second part of it is we look at the traffic levels that are there today and kind of project it out a little bit. I established a capital sinking fund that looks at the infrastructure having a life and needing to be replaced at some point in time. So that tries to encapsulate needing improvements later, but not like lane expansions or anything of that sort. They couldn't afford it.
Well, could that be an issue that other subdivisions could face? And I'll just use the RV as an example. If the MSBU is based upon single family homes, but then they are basically, RVs are placed on those properties, which would greatly increase the density. Wouldn't that cause the same issue on some of these other roads?
Yes, ma'am, potentially, and I don't think you basically would wind up not capturing, like you mentioned before, that revenue source, because let's say you just had a 10-unit subdivision. Our current method of assessment is a per lot assessment. We don't do a per unit, we don't do a square foot. It is, if you own a lot, no matter what's on that lot, you get the single assessment the same as everybody else. So yes, there is a potential if they densify within one. Obviously the traffic usage will increase commensurate with that, which would more rapidly decay, I guess, or degrade the infrastructure. Those individuals in there, in order to bring that level of service back up, they would bear the cost of that because an MSBU is established to where the cost obligation to keep it at a set level of service isn't borne by the remaining citizenry.
It's usually the public.
That's right, to use it.
So in that, there would be a greater assessment if you had the full units per lot or per parcel?
Chances are you would have the assessment participants beginning to be a little more vocal and saying, hey, these roads are tearing up, we need to do something. At that point, you would determine what that something is and the cost associated with it. You would determine what that equal assessment was for all the lot owners. They have an opportunity to discuss it at the public hearing on, we think the assessment should go from $1 to $3. They can voice their opinion to you guys. You guys can say, yes, they've all said we don't want it, so we're going to keep it at the level of service it is. We're not going to support this with citizenry dollars or, general fund dollars. Or they could say, we're okay with our assessment going from $1 to $3 and you increase it the next year. So they have say in it. They would have to initiate, or we could initiate to say, we think you need to do this because the road is going to degrade to the point it's going to cost more 10 years from now. But at some point in time, you have to publicly express that. And that's when they would have an option to tell you guys, we're okay with you doing this or we don't want you to do it.
Is there, I should say, what indicators would we see on those roadways?
Like you did before, it was an old chip seal type road before, a slack road, and you started seeing potholes becoming a lot more prevalent. You're gonna see that with the milling material as well because it doesn't lend itself to just going in and grading. So you're gonna have the spot repairs, and at some point it's going to be to where it's such a patchwork that you're patching patches. And it's gonna be a user type reflection of, we're tired of the washboards and the potholes, we gotta do something different because this isn't working.
Does that exist also in the areas that are paved?
Certainly.
Yes.
What indicators would you have there?
Same.
So it'd be a ripple effect or cold patch or things like that, potholes that should.
You have your edges usually ravel across, you have delamination, you have potholes. There's a host of things that a paved surface will just exhibit or display when it starts to lose its structural value.
Thanks, sir.
Yes, sir.
I invite the board to drive down Spring Warrior Road and look at the intersection of Strickland Landing Drive with Spring Warrior Road, Strickland Landing Drive. It right there is quite a bit of deterioration because the milling wasn't put all the way out to Spring Warrior Road. I don't know why, but the milling itself is beginning to deteriorate. This was done back in Jack Brown's tenure. So it's 8 or 10 years old now. One of the big things that will tear that road up is for this subdivision to build their road. They're gonna have several hundred dump truck loads full of lime rock and asphalt drive over Strickland Landing Drive to get there to build their road. That's gonna tear it up almost immediately beyond the discussion of the increased traffic.
I think that'd be part of consideration.
Absolutely. We would obviously express to the board that we would obligate the developer for final plat approval to ensure that the connecting roadways were at an equal or better condition once they have achieved their completion of their development, so that the Strickland Landing MSBU participants weren't saddled with the liability of addressing that cost themselves.
A lot of footnotes.
Yes, it is. And, we'll do our best effort to try to do the whole what if type scenarios and come up with a position that you guys will have an opportunity to discuss and decide on. Because the only leverage you have is the final plat approval, because once you get to that point, they can legally sell the land.
You gotta sign.
That's all you got? You and you?
I got something, it's okay.
Go ahead.
I just want to announce the budget workshop dates. Monday, the first one is Monday, July the 18th at 9 a.m.
Budget workshop, hold on. We get some information on this? Send it back to.
July the 18th, Monday, July the 18th at 9 a.m.
Okay. July 18th.
I may have sent out those dates.
Yeah, I think it's been sent out, but I was just calling to announce them for the meeting.
Okay.
So the if necessaries are Thursday, July the 21st at 9 a.m.
21st?
Yes, and then Monday, the 25th at 9 a.m. So those are workshop dates. So we'll start on Monday, the 18th, and if we need the others, then we'll continue to those days.
And we have a board meeting on the 19th as well.
And then, so Thursday, July the 28th at 9 a.m. is the special meeting to set the millage.
28th?
Yes, sir. And then,
Board second.
I don't have the times yet for the public hearings, but the public hearings for the budget we're looking at Monday, September the 12th, and Monday, September the 9th. The first one, Monday, September 12th, and the second one, Monday, September the 19th. That would be, the public hearings on the budget.
12th and the 19th. Yes. And that, there's what, 6 weeks?
I don't have a time for those. I don't know if you decided what time those are yet.
September 12th and 19th.
We'll have more information on those.
Okay. I was hit by I asked by some of the employees of the county that the Monday, yesterday was a holiday, Juneteenth. They said the city was observing that, and they want to know what's the feeling of the county commission. Are we doing what they do?
I thought maybe we could bring that to the board in November when we approve the board calendar.
Go ahead, you did.
If the board wishes us to add that
Yeah.
or give, Gary, how many holidays do we have now? You said 11?
Well, no, I didn't look to see how many I know that the,
Hold on, we've got the
federal
calendar.
holidays are 11, but I don't think we take all of those.
I think we have 12.
We have 12.
I think 13, because we added Veterans Day at some point.
Veterans Day several years back.
We have 13 paid holidays.
And I had this, and I had that discussion with some of the constitutional officers too, and they would like the board to address it at the time they do their calendar and decide, if you want to change the date out, like take one away and give that one, or you just want to add one, or whatever, the board's pleasure at that time. We felt like it probably, when you go over your calendar, would be the best time to make that decision.
All right. Bishop? Mr. Clerk? What do I hear?
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
So there's the last,
We'll let you know.
payment sheet.
Line muted.
These two values